The child's heart stopped at 11:47 p.m., and Dr. Sarah Ortiz felt her own heart shatter. 3 hours of fighting to save little Emma, and all she could do now was tell the parents their daughter was never coming home. Emma Thompson had arrived at Metropolitan General's emergency room clinging to life after a devastating car accident. 7 years old, with curly blonde hair and freckles across her nose, she looked so small on the adult-sized gurney. Her parents, David and Jennifer, followed closely behind, their faces masks of terror and desperate hope. Dr. Sarah Ortiz took one look at Emma's injuries and knew this would be the fight of her career. Internal bleeding, possible brain trauma, and multiple fractures. But the little girl's heart was still beating, and where there was life, there was hope. "Get her to OR 3 immediately," Sarah commanded, her voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "Call pediatric anesthesia and have 2 units of O negative ready." As they rushed toward the operating room, Emma's tiny hand found Sarah's. Her blue eyes, so similar to Sarah's own, flickered open for just a moment. "Am I going to be okay, doctor?" she whispered. Sarah squeezed the small hand gently. "I'm going to take very good care of you, Emma. Just close your eyes and rest." It was a promise she would spend the rest of her life wishing she could have kept. But some promises are beyond even the most skilled hands to keep. The surgery began with cautious optimism. Sarah's team worked with practiced precision, addressing the most critical injuries first. The internal bleeding was worse than initially thought, but Sarah had faced similar cases before. Her blonde hair was tucked securely beneath her surgical cap, her piercing blue eyes focused entirely on the delicate work before her. "Blood pressure is dropping," announced Dr. Kim Patel, the anesthesiologist. "We're losing her." Sarah's hands moved faster, her surgical training taking over as she fought to stem the bleeding. Around her, the team worked in synchronized desperation. Nurses anticipating her every need, residents learning what it meant to fight for a life that mattered more than statistics. For 2 hours, they battled. Sarah repaired torn blood vessels, removed damaged tissue, and performed surgical miracles that would have impressed her professors. Emma's young body showed remarkable resilience, responding to treatment with the fighting spirit that only children possess. "Heart rate's stabilizing, Doctor," Patel announced at one point, and Sarah allowed herself a moment of hope. But then Emma's little body began shutting down in ways that medical school had never fully prepared Sarah to handle. The trauma was too extensive, the damage too severe for even a child's incredible healing capacity to overcome. The moment that would haunt Sarah forever came without warning. Emma's heart rhythm became erratic on the monitors, the steady beeping replaced by the chaotic patterns of a failing cardiovascular system. Sarah tried everything: medications, electrical stimulation, manual cardiac massage. Her team worked with renewed urgency, but they all knew they were fighting a losing battle. "Come on, Emma," Sarah whispered, her hands working frantically to restart the small heart. "Come on, sweetheart. Your mommy and daddy are waiting for you." But at 11:47 p.m., the monitors went flat. The sound that haunts every medical professional, the long, steady tone that means a life has ended, filled the operating room. Sarah continued chest compressions for another 20 minutes, refusing to accept what everyone else in the room already knew. When she finally stopped, her surgical gown was soaked with sweat, and her blue eyes were filled with tears she couldn't hold back. "Time of death, 12:07 a.m., she announced, her voice barely audible. The operating room fell silent except for the hum of machines that no longer mattered. Sarah stared down at Emma Thompson, a little girl who would never grow up, never go to school, never have a family of her own. 7 years of life ended on a Tuesday night despite everything modern medicine could offer. Walking to the family waiting room was the longest journey of Sarah's career. David and Jennifer Thompson looked up expectantly as Sarah approached, still wearing her surgical scrubs. The hope in their eyes was devastating. They trusted her, believed she had saved their daughter just as she had saved countless other patients. "I'm so sorry," Sarah began, her voice breaking on the words she had practiced but never wanted to say. "We did everything we could, but Emma's injuries were too severe. She didn't survive the surgery. The sound Jennifer Thompson made wasn't quite a scream. It was something more primal, a noise that comes from the deepest places of human grief. David caught his wife as her legs gave out, his own face crumbling as the reality of their loss hit them. Sarah stood there, feeling helpless in a way that all her medical training had never prepared her for. She could repair hearts, remove tumors, save lives, but she couldn't bring back their little girl, and she couldn't take away their pain. She wasn't in any pain at the end, Sarah offered, though the words felt inadequate. She was peaceful. David Thompson looked up at her with red-rimmed eyes. "Thank you for fighting for her," he said quietly. "Thank you for trying." Those words broke Sarah more than any accusation could have. Their gratitude in the face of such devastating loss showed a grace she wasn't sure she possessed. Later that night, Sarah sat alone in her office, still wearing the scrubs from Emma's surgery. She stared at her hands that had saved hundreds of lives but couldn't save the one that mattered most tonight. Her blonde hair hung loose around her shoulders, and her blue eyes were puffy from tears she rarely allowed herself to cry. Medicine had taught her to compartmentalize, to move on from losses and focus on the patients she could still help. But Emma Thompson's freckled face and trusting blue eyes had carved a space in her heart that would never fully heal. Sometimes the greatest lesson in medicine isn't about saving lives, it's about accepting when you can't. Dr. Sarah Ortiz, the fearless surgeon who took impossible cases and won against incredible odds, learned that night that being a doctor also meant carrying the weight of every life she couldn't save. Emma Thompson had taught her something no medical textbook ever could, that healing others sometimes means accepting the wounds that never fully close in yourself. The blonde surgeon who had always pushed forward, always found a way, discovered that some battles are meant to be fought even when victory is impossible, because the fighting itself is what makes us human. Sarah Ortiz's loss of little Emma reminds us that behind every doctor's strength lies a collection of hearts they couldn't save. Her story shows us that true courage isn't just about saving lives, it's about carrying the weight of those we lose and still choosing to fight for tomorrow's patients. If Dr. Sarah Ortiz's most difficult night touched your heart, subscribe to the Frontline Voice for more real stories from the medical world. Hit like if you believe doctors are human too, carrying losses that shape their dedication. Tell us in the comments, how do medical professionals cope with losing patients? Share Sarah's story with someone who understands that healing others requires accepting our own wounds. Until next time, remember that the strongest hearts are often the ones that have been broken while trying to save others.